Oh, okay. Yeah, I had a little bit of trouble this morning, so everything's been rebooted and restarted.
Hello, and welcome to The Path to Automation with me, Jane Skuse, and Nick Gradwell of Amberley Innovations.
Hi.
Hi, Nick.
Hi there.
How are you this afternoon?
Yes, good, good.
Good. Good. Ready to talk about the path to automation?
Yes, yes. The long and winding path.
Long and winding, but ideally not so winding. But I was
No.
going to just introduce the subject by saying that it's really what we're talking about is the kind of the three sections, the three services that you've identified
Hmm.
that are vital in that taking a company from, I guess, the first stage of identifying a need or a desire for automation, taking them on that journey and ending up with a useful product at the end of it, with some transformation and some change within the business, and how you go about that really, how you engage the company and how you make that work.
Yeah, and it's not often the way you'd expect it to be, I don't think. I mean,
No,
we
I was going to say that the first on my list is you talk about data migration, which is not, I think, where people would expect you necessarily to start. It's maybe
you're Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, the data piece is absolutely where we start. So typically, when somebody will, for whatever reason, they'll either identify there's an area of their business that needs improving. Okay,
yeah,
I mean, it becomes quite obvious that there's technology and there's things out there that can help them be more efficient on a day-to-day basis,
mm.
and people will come to you or come to us and often say, look, can we automate this? Um,
Is that
and
is that how it often starts? Is we've got this process. It's messy. It's manual. It goes wrong.
uh, that's what it's one of two paths. It's they've identified a need for automation in their business. So there's clearly challenges in inefficiency, or they're just a desire to improve efficiency in a particular area,
Yeah,
or they're aware of that automation is a thing and they've read about it, they've heard about the advancements, particularly in AI, and how that can be brought into their business. And
yeah.
then they'll typically approach us with one of those two questions, which is we can either we've got a process, can you help us automate that?
Hmm.
Or they'll say, look, we've heard about this automation thing. Can you come and work with our business and help us identify where we can how we can automate our business. And they'll usually have an area, be it finance, be it sales, be it to do with systems that aren't quite doing what they want them to do, and they want to automate various parts of that.
Mm.
But what we find is very quickly, it's that the first step is to do with either data and or systems. Okay, so a lot of the problem that people have when they're trying to automate a system involves getting data from A to B, or producing a report of this kind, or getting a system to present a certain piece of information. And what we find is that data within their organization is usually somewhere else, right?
Not accessible.
Yeah, or not easily
Unpackable.
accessible,
Mm.
or it's accessible via a download that happens every night, or if
Right.
they do have it, they can't guarantee it's up to date because they don't know whether this system's run or that system's run. So we
Yeah.
typically, when we start, we need to look at data. And so when we go into an organization, we have a very simple sort of three-step process that we work for, which is we look at the data, we look at the systems, and after we've uncovered and understood that correctly, then we can start to talk about automation.
So you do a discovery piece really when you first go in.
Yeah, absolutely that. And that's either led by a very specific requirement
Mm-hmm.
or as a general requirement in their business. So, I mean, a lot of the gains we find, and a lot of the gains that people actually want,
Yeah.
come from those first two steps. So, getting data accessible in a format and in the right place is often a massive benefit to organizations. Just
Even
and
without the automation part.
even without the
Yeah.
automation, because
Yeah.
in truth, it is automation. Getting data from A to B without having to do anything with it is effectively automation, right?
It's true.
It's not process automation necessarily, but it is automation. So that's always our first step of when we approach a business. So
Mm.
we either take data from multiple sources and put it in another source, or we'll take it from multiple systems and put it in a data source, or we'll take it from multiple sources and put it into a system, or a combination of the both.
Yeah.
And that's why the first two steps are often merged into one. So the data, moving the data, and integrating systems is often done at the same time, because that movement of data is often what is needed to integrate systems. So that's where we come from. One of the advantages we do have, and one of the advantages that modern technology has brought, is there are so many ways to integrate systems now. So a lot of businesses, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will realise that they've got this at least one legacy system, this one system in the corner of the room that they're praying and hoping isn't going to fall on its knees,
Yeah.
because it's built on an old operating system, or it's built on some software that's legacy and isn't being supported, or something like that. And one of the benefits we now have with RPA and AI driven RPA, which is robotic process automation, is we can, if it doesn't have an API or a programmable way of getting access to the data, or you can't get directly into the database, you can emulate a human operating that task. So, say you were looking to copy data from that, you could emulate literally somebody keying in a various set of keystrokes,
Mm-hmm.
and then getting that data, copying it to somewhere, and then send it somewhere else. So you've always got a way with modern technology, with RPA and AI, a way of getting access to that data in an automated way. So that's one of the key things we work with, and we find, because we're not an RPA company, we're
No.
not just an RPA company. We do RPA, and we also do bespoke development. What we can find is we can work with an organization and work with their existing systems and their existing data to make sure that we can always find the right solution for that business.
And how do you find people respond when you first go in? Do you engage the client and their people early on? Presumably, you must do if you need access to their systems and their data, and you're kind of fertling around in their back office. That
Yeah.
sounds like an awful euphemism. I'm sorry.
No, nobody really likes that, right?
Nobody really knows that. No.
Nobody really likes people doing that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the first part of this, I say the first step on the road is data, but actually the first step is people, right?
Yeah.
Because there has to be both the desire to change, and all that desire to change, and then you've got to have somebody, the right people within the organisation lined up to make that change happen.
Yeah.
Okay, it's change management and transformational projects whether it's with new technology or whether it's pen and paper or whether, is always a challenge. So the key thing with any of these projects is to make sure that the business is lined up and the right people in the organization are lined up and behind it and supporting that.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to make sure that you're absolutely crystal clear up front with what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, the requirements of the team and the people who
Yeah.
are involved, and be absolutely crystal clear with that, and make sure that the sponsorship of the project comes from very high up in the organization.
Yeah.
So, um, and we found when we approach that from the people perspective first, if we go people, data, systems, automation, we
Yeah.
find that we have a very, very high success rate. Um, and we've had this conversation before, Jane.
Yeah.
As an organisation, when we've gone into projects, and if the people aren't lined in up, or they're not bought in, or there's a genuine there's just some reason that there's a blocker, we will walk away from projects, because
Mm.
until you have that people line up, the people lined up and bought in, doesn't matter how good your technology is, you'll never be successful.
I mean, that must be a key part of. I don't want to talk about too much about the failure of projects, because obviously
Mm-hmm.
that's not what we're here to really discuss. We're talking about how it is that you make them succeed so frequently.
Yep.
But I suspect that people element is a big part of why so many IT projects don't reach their goals. They don't fulfill the expectations, and they don't really deliver.
Well, I mean, you just have to look at any government-run project,
Well,
in any country in the world, I pretty much would say, and the whole world is littered with IT failures,
mm,
and you can argue the reasons for that, but certainly I would say the number one reason is because it is the people issue. The right people aren't involved, or the right people aren't bought in, or the right people haven't got the right information, or they're not given the time and space
mm,
to work on the project. And we will only work with organisations that we believe are lined up in the correct
mm.
way, and want to make a real go of it.
Well, I think the more I talk to you, Nick, the more I realise that the way that you work is very people focused, but it's also and it's very responsive. You
Hmm.
never go in. Your first port of call is this kind of discovery place where you go and find out exactly how the land lies within a company,
Yeah.
and whatever they're telling you about what they need, you you know you can then look at where things are. One, give them a path to get to where they ideally want to be, but also suggest you're very responsive to how a company actually is, and you bring your expertise in what else you think they can achieve actually alongside their identified goals.
Well, absolutely. I mean, when we engage with a company, the reason we're happy to walk away from various projects is because the companies we do work with, we have a long and lasting partnership,
Yeah.
and we do see it like that. Our expertise is in going in and performing these transformational projects. That's what we do,
Yeah.
and we don't expect anybody to be experts. We don't expect their data to be good. We don't expect them to have followed best practices in the past. We make no judgment about their current position at all. The only thing that will prevent us moving forward with a project is if we don't believe that they're going to put the requisite effort and time and attention into achieving what they want to achieve. And often trying to figure out what an organization wants to achieve is a real challenge. Okay. And until you can get that crystal clear, it's project management 101 or
Mm-hmm.
product management 101. You've got to know where you're going to try and get there. That said, there's a utopia, and then there's reality.
Yeah.
And, the organizations we work with that are successful always have a real dose of reality, and say, actually, it might be challenging, it might be hard.
Mm.
And those kinds of projects are the ones we love. We love the technically challenging problems, really, really
Yeah.
difficult projects, as long as everyone in the organisation is lined up and are prepared to accept the facts in front of them. And do you know what? On the whole, most organisations are,
Yeah.
but often we don't. find out, and to, the idea of change versus the reality of change is somewhat different. Um, and so, early on, if you get people line up and they're aware of what the impact of their job is during the implementation process and after that process, then you will find that that giving that level of awareness allows people to make an informed decision of whether A, it's the right thing to do, and B, whether it's going to be cost effective and provide the value they're expecting when we get to the end point.
So it's a constant process of assessment and communication.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you have a coarse grained view of where you're trying to get, but in the near future, you have a very sort of granular view. So that becomes this very, in sort of agile product and project management terms, a very fine grained near term.
Yeah.
But you do need structure to get you to the end point. So you do need to have those key milestones and in place.
I was going to say, perhaps we could fairly briefly kind of go over each of the data migration, systems integration, and finally automation, in terms of, maybe you could give an example.
Yeah.
Put you on the spot. I know you have lots of examples. I'm not sure you knew I was going to quite go here.
That's all right.
Of a kind of an example of a company you've worked with, and kind of a real life example of how you've done each of those sections. How it works and what they've provided and how you've moved forward.
So actually, a project we're working on at the moment is a really good example of.
I just think real life examples are just, people can really engage with them. You can really understand how it would apply to your company at that point.
Well, exactly. I mean, and this example hopefully is one that will resonate with quite a few people. So we're currently working with an organisation that is highly acquisitive. So they've bought a number of businesses.
Yeah.
And their initial requirement came from, they want to be able to do financial forecasting more effectively, consistently across all the organisations that they've bought.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. And what they've got is a lot of successful business, but all slightly different ways.
I think I lost you slightly there. Could you just repeat what you said, just in case it's translated across?
So Jane, you broke up a little bit there, or I did.
Yes, I was just saying the same. If you could just repeat what you last said, that would be great.
Yes. So what you've got is a lot of good organisations doing a lot of great work, but they're all doing it in slightly different ways. So finding a way to have some consistency across that starts at looking at how when you're looking at forecasting, it's all about how they plan and track sales and leads, and
it's all about where the data is, isn't it, and where it's coming from.
Well, you're exactly right. So some of these having had a number of discussions, the outcome was, the best way to do this is to put a company-wide CRM, customer relationship management system in.
Mm-hmm.
So they've been through a big procurement process. They've chosen a system that's suitable, is highly customizable in a lot of ways, but also can provide them with that level of consistency. But the first port of call for that was obviously to talk to each of the businesses that have been acquired, to look at what they're currently doing, look at their systems that they have now. But of course, the first thing you've got to do is, how do you get all of that data in all of their different systems into one system?
Yeah.
And so it all, as we said, it always starts at the data.
Yeah.
So the way we built this with some middleware. So we have a piece of software that does the data import. It takes the data from the data sources. We have we bought a system that allows us to validate and cleanse that data. And then at that point, we can transform it into the format that is required upstream for the new CRM system that they've bought. And
at this point, you're talking to head office, and you're talking to all of the people in the individual acquired organisations, if that's the way to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked about that transformation piece and the people.
A lot of conversations.
It's a lot of conversations, and for a lot of a lot of the businesses that have been acquired, from them, they've got a system that's working very well and very nicely for them.
And no obvious need to change or.
You're exactly right. So finding some middle ground on that is a challenge. So, we've looked for some wins. How can we get them some additional reporting? How can we be more help them be more responsive to new leads coming in? So so we've had to work with each of the individual companies to try and figure out what their wins are as well. How we can give everybody a win in this
So
whole.
you're really embedded in the company. You have to really know what's going on. That
Yeah,
level really.
and that takes time, and
Yeah.
it takes time and effort. But for the organisation we're working with, it's very clear in both an efficiency way and in a financial way that it absolutely makes sense to do this and get this right. And that's the first point. If it doesn't add up on either of those fronts, if it's not financially beneficial to them, I mean, Jane, we give an ROI guarantee, right? So if they're not getting a return on
Which
investment,
I think is amazing. Every time you say it, I find it amazing. But obviously, there's a
well,
reason you did it.
I mean, you've got to believe in what you do, right? And we give that ROI, and if that's not clear, be that in manpower savings or in system savings or whatever, it's just not worth us doing it. So
No.
So back to that project. So the first part is, how do we get the data in? How do we get all of that data into that one system?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's the first piece, and we've done that in this particular case through a piece of middleware. We've how we've got that data is either using some scripts we've written, or the middleware itself can support that out the
A
box.
bespoke approach.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
use a process that will bring that data in.
absolutely. And then, we didn't need to do the cleansing piece, but anybody who's worked with CRMs knows that data gets pretty dirty pretty
Mm.
quickly. So we've got that cleansing piece in the middle, and then when it gets imported to the system, then they've got clean data to start with when they start working with it.
Brilliant.
The other side of this is a lot of CRMs have, and I'm just using a very real example, have marketing systems, market automation systems as well. So we talk about that second piece, which is the systems integration piece at this point.
Yep.
So how do we, we've got several organisations, about 20 organisations, I think, all with, their own marketing piece. So we've written that integration piece. Again, we've used some middleware here, because
Mm-hmm.
what happens is it gets very complicated when you're just going point to point and point to point every time people upgrade their software or what have you, right? So
Yep.
having a middleware piece to help manage that is something that we've done in this case. It worked for us. And then, so we now got their marketing systems talking to their sales systems. We've got all the data in that they need, and it's in a decent format, and it's clean.
So as
We
you said, you've probably already made. They are already seeing benefits from this at this point, presumably.
Well,
Even
absolutely, because now the end system can start producing reporting and can start reporting on their data and their activity anyway. So, and they're
you
getting.
are automating as you go along. It's not that you're just putting things in place. You're not just moving where the data is. You're making it talk to one another. Talk to each other.
You're absolutely right, and that is process automation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But then what we do is, then once that's all in place, we start to look at, we talked about where are the wins for some of these organisations, and it's at that point where we start writing sort of bespoke workflows, bespoke automations. One organisation in that one of the organisations really needs a really fast approval process when people are either discounting or they're making a decision about whether to take a deal or not.
Okay.
And we've written an automation routine for them where they send, so where one of the sales reps can add some notes, press send. If it hits an approval trigger for one reason or other, their manager gets sent a WhatsApp message, and with the details, and from within that WhatsApp message, they just click on a link, either yes or no to approve it or not approve it. Goes back into the system, and the approval either happens or it doesn't, according to
immediately. That's amazing.
And so that's, but if you imagine that if they haven't got the right data, and they haven't got systems talking to one another in the first place, then that sort of those real gains, those real efficiency advantages that you can get from true process automation just simply don't happen.
You can't put that in, can you? If you haven't got the information coming in, you can't. You simply can't do that job.
You've got it. Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. So hopefully, Jane, that's a very real life example of how we work and what we've done in quite a complex business environment, I think.
Yeah. I think that's brilliant, because I think that means that anybody looking at this and thinking about their own situation, or their own company, and how things work, will be able to see that you have a very clear process of how you engage with the company. You know what you're doing in terms of building teams within that company, and encouraging people to come along with you on that journey. The internal sales of it, and that you know exactly what you're doing in terms of giving them an end result.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't happen quickly, and it doesn't happen overnight always.
No, I don't. Well, I don't think anybody would expect that, would they? That these are not straightforward necessarily.
They're not. That said, I mean, we take on projects of all sizes. We sort of range from the sort of mid SME up to sort of mid-range companies. We're not trying. I mean, we do work with enterprises, but that's not really where we target. And the reason for that is because I think enterprises have both got the resource and the focus and direction, and often the skills in house. Whereas the smaller organisations, they see the need for it, but but it's very hard to engage and get moving on a project like that when you're at that size, and you're usually resource constrained and knowledge constrained as well. So so that's why we'll take on small projects or larger, more complex projects as well.
Each one its own puzzle.
Always. Well, that's the point of it, right?
Well, Nick, thank you for that. That was brilliant. I'm going to say goodbye now to everybody. Thank you for watching. We will be back with more insight into Amberley Innovations, essentially, very soon. So
Wonderful.
Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, everyone.